I made a video a couple of days ago in this very field actually, which I titled Spirit in the Sky after a Norman Greenbaum song. And I've been thinking since why I made that video, because I don't always know what I'm going to talk about when I make these videos. I sometimes just get a kind of, I don't know, some kind of ellipsis, some kind of gesture inside myself, and think, oh, I'll start talking and see what happens, and that's usually what happens, and that's what's the case with the Spirit in the Sky video. And it's not until afterwards, either till I get home and I'm sitting at the laptop with a cup of coffee, or sometimes days or weeks later, like, I think, oh, I wonder what that was about then. And I'm thinking about that Spirit in the Sky video. And I think it's probably pretty obvious actually, but it wasn't obvious to me at the time. But I suppose what I was thinking about with that is trying to identify some aspects of our embodied experience, which has to do with the sky, which has to do with the ground, which has to do with being a material being, a material object, a material event, which we are as bodies, and having the kind of sensory organs, the kind of interoceptive mechanisms, and the kind of experiences that we have. You know, to me it seems like there's a kind of nest or a raft of activities and events and affordances and engagements that we make, all of which have something to do with the up-down dimension, which I've talked about before actually. But some of those things that are listed in the Spirit in the Sky video were to do with that, you know, to do with things like weight, to do with just the logic of perspectivalism, the logic of looking down and seeing the ground below you and looking up and seeing nothing, or an immensity, depending on how you look at it. That kind of logic, which is a very organised logic, I think, for the most part. The different parts of that experience of the vertical dimension are very coherent, obviously, because they obey the laws of physics, or the embodied laws of physics, I suppose I should say. And I think that coherence plays itself out in metaphorical uses of that vertical dimension. It's again something I've spoken about before. And I've talked about people like James Hillman and how he uses down really, and the notion of the underworld as a metaphor of how it comes up in Freud, how it comes up in, well, depth psychology more generally, psychoanalysis in particular, and conversely how it's picking up a bit of the video of the rubbish quality, but I'll hope that the wind will stop. So if you're watching this, stick with it for a second. I'll go over here near the hedge so the wind is less. So something to do with depth psychology, and the converse of that depth is heights. And so height corresponds to elevated viewing position, corresponds to moving closer to where the sun is, where the light is, the light's coming from, corresponds to lightness in the sense of a loss of weight. And here I'm interested in Heidegger. I haven't really got there with it yet, but here's the use of light. I think it's pronounced Liftung, which is the lightning, which in some of his writings he uses to mean lightness, and other times he uses to mean lightning in the sense of lightening a load. As when you pull up an anchor in a ship, you lighten the ship. I think that's the analogy he uses. So I'm quite interested in that as a kind of consistency within this embodied experience, but also how those coherencies and the overall schematic understanding of height plays itself out in metaphorical terms. So why it makes sense for somebody like Andrew Cohen, for example, to talk about the higher we. It makes sense, at least to me, to talk about the higher we, because we have this embodied notion of rising being something to do with convergence, and that's a completely embodied experience. when you look up, things seem to converge, particularly if you're standing in a clearing where the tree trunks all point to the centre and all seem to point to a convergent moment above you. And of course, Desjardins as well talks about convergence and rising. Why higher we? Because there's something about the social, I think, in that rising. When you physically rise or stand on a higher point or climb up a tree and see further, you have a more kind of social vision. You can see into everyone's backyard, you can see what other people are doing. Your vision is not perspectively located at the same level, literally, as other people's. You are at a social level. And I think Freud also talks about the social level as being a slightly elevated level of engagement. I don't want to spin them all out now, but I think basically what I'm thinking of there is to do with a kind of identification of the of some kind of phenomenology of embodied being, which coheres around this theme, this schematic understanding of height and the various features which narrate that schematic, if you like, and how those play themselves out consistently across a whole range of abstract ideas to do with things like spirituality, to do with higher knowledge, to do with the sublime, to do with the beautiful, why we put beautiful things on plinths, all that kind of idea, really. So I think that's what I was talking about with Spirit in the Sky. I mean, the obvious conclusion that is drawn from that Spirit in the Sky video specifically is that I think it's talking about God, of course. The Norman Greenbaum song is a kind of a religious song. It kind of illustrates the Spirit in the Sky as God. But that's what I was interested in there, or what became interesting as I was talking about it, is that a lot of those, a lot of the logics of that height schema to do with light, convergence, immensity, consciousness, oversight, omniscience, kind of vaporousness. A lot of the entailments of that scheme are all seem to be the ones that we attribute to some kind of God figure, the Spirit in the Sky, for completely embodied reasons. Tends to have those kind of characteristics. And of course he hands things down, doesn't he? And meets people on mountaintops.